The ceremony hadn't even started when Brandon took his wife's arm and led her to the back row, saying the front was full. Then he turned and waved another woman forward into the reserved seats. The room noticed. Kezia sat alone in the back, surrounded by strangers. No tears, no reaction. She opened the folded program in her lap, found the page she was looking for, and read her own name listed as the featured speaker. She clicked her pen. She was ready. The Morrison University auditorium seated just over 200 people, and by the time the Lawson-Carter family arrived, most of those seats were already filling. Families pressed together in the rows, mothers smoothing their dresses, fathers holding phones up to capture everything. The air smelled like perfume and pride, and the particular kind of nervous energy that only graduation days carry. The feeling of something ending and something else not yet named beginning. Brandon walked through the side entrance with his hand resting at the small of a woman's back, not his wife's back. He had been steering Kezia through the lobby with 2 fingers at her elbow. The way a man moves furniture he is no longer interested in, talking over his shoulder the whole time to someone else, his voice easy and social, his body angled away. He was dressed sharp, gray suit, fresh line along his jaw, shoes that caught the lobby light. He looked like a man who had made a decision and felt good about having made it. He brought Kezia to the last row on the right side of the hall, seats near the wall, beneath the overhang of the upper balcony, where the sightlines were narrower and the air was a little stale. The kind of seats you end up in when someone has already decided where you belong before you arrived. "Front's full," he said. He didn't look at her when he said it. He was already turning back the way he came. Kezia looked at the front section. She could count 4 empty seats in the reserved rows from where she was standing. She did not say that. She simply settled into the chair, smoothed the back of her skirt, and set her bag on her knee with the quiet deliberateness of a woman who has chosen not to spend her energy on what just happened. Brandon was already moving. He raised one hand toward the entrance, and the woman in the white blazer, the one he had been steering through the lobby with the warmth he had stopped showing his wife somewhere around year 15 of their marriage, lifted her chin and walked forward. She moved like someone accustomed to being watched, heels measured, chin tilted, the particular posture of a woman who believes she has already won the thing she is still in the middle of taking. Her name was Yvette. She settled into the reserved front row seat like she had been keeping it warm in her mind for months. She crossed her legs, smoothed her blazer, and leaned slightly toward Brandon with the familiar ease of someone who had stopped pretending to be nothing. The room noticed. That is the unavoidable truth of public betrayal. It does not stay private once it makes contact with air. It spreads. The woman 2 seats down from Kezia leaned toward her husband and whispered something behind her program. A man in the middle section looked from the front row to the back row, and then pressed his lips together and said nothing because there was nothing polite to say. A faculty member near the side aisle caught Kezia's eye for 1 second, just one, and looked away quickly, the way people look away from something that is not their pain, but is close enough to recognize. Everyone was waiting to see what Kezia would do. She did nothing that they expected. She opened the graduation program slowly, with the unhurried attention of someone who had been looking forward to reading it. She turned the pages carefully until she found what she was looking for near the back. Her expression did not shift. Her hands were steady. She reached into her bag and pulled out a leather journal, old, worn dark at the corners and along the spine from years of handling, and set it on her knee beside the open program. Then she clicked her pen. and she waited. Brandon had spent months making her invisible. He had no idea she had spent those same months preparing for this exact moment. They had met 23 years ago at a church cookout in Atlanta, the kind of afternoon event where everyone knows everyone, and the potato salad is a serious matter of reputation. Kezia was 26, finishing her master's degree in education policy, standing near the back fence in a yellow dress she had ironed twice that morning because she wanted to look like she had not tried too hard, even though she had. Brandon had been near the grill with a group of men, laughing at something loud and easy, and when he looked across the yard and found her standing alone, he walked over with the direct confidence of a man who has decided something and doesn't see any reason to delay. He was genuine back then. That was the thing she came back to sometimes. Not angrily, just honestly. He had been genuinely warm. He asked questions and remembered what she said. He showed up at places she mentioned she would be. He called when he said he would. They were married 18 months later in a small church that had no air conditioning in June, and both families crowded in anyway because the love in that room was real enough to make the discomfort seem beside the point. Jordan came 2 years after the wedding. Kezia kept building, classroom to administration, administration to university affairs, finally into academic leadership at Morrison. Every step was slow and earned. Brandon's construction management business grew alongside her, and for years they were two people moving in the same direction, building separate things that still added up to one life. The first signal was so small she almost didn't record it. Brandon started tilting his phone away when she walked into a room. Not dramatically, just a slight turn of the wrist, the screen angled toward his chest. He had always been relaxed about his phone before. Left it on counters, handed it to her to look something up, set it face up on restaurant tables. The new habit was so subtle that a less observant woman might have attributed it to nothing. Kezia noticed it and said nothing and began watching more carefully. Then there was the receipt from his gray jacket, discovered during laundry. A restaurant downtown she had been asking to try for 2 years. The receipt was dated a Thursday when Brandon had told her he had a client dinner. It was for 2 people. There was wine. Then there was the name, Yvette. It loaded on his screen while his phone was charging on the kitchen counter, and Brandon covered the distance between the counter and the table in 3 long steps and picked up the phone. But Kezia had already read the first line. She turned back to the window with her coffee and watched the neighbor's dog pace the fence, and she stored that name in the quiet, internal drawer where she had been keeping everything else. She began using the journal her mother had given her differently. Not for work notes and ideas anymore, for dates, times, the small discrepancies between what Brandon said and what she observed. She wrote without conclusions, just facts, the way a good researcher does, recording what happened without arguing about what it meant. The journal was already half full by the time she understood she was building a case. The year she was promoted to Assistant Dean of Academic Affairs was the same year Brandon's warmth curdled into something else. He didn't announce the change. He just stopped celebrating her. Went quiet in the particular way that certain men go quiet when someone they share a life with surpasses them in a way they cannot name without sounding small. He began suggesting her job was less significant than she thought, that the university was using her, that she worked too much, traveled to conferences too much, was too caught up in other people's problems to tend to her own house. She listened. She didn't argue. She was too occupied with noticing. There was a family dinner that October at Brandon's mother's house. Denise and her kids there, the whole table full of food and noise. Someone mentioned Kezia's upcoming keynote at the university graduation. It was a real honor. She had been nominated by her mentor, Dr. Phyllis Okafor, and confirmed by the president's office months before. The table congratulated her with genuine warmth. Kezia thanked everyone and said she was looking forward to it. Denise went quiet. Not the quiet of someone reaching for a response. The quiet of someone who already had information that changed the shape of what they were hearing. She looked across the table at Brandon for a fraction of a second, and something passed between them. Some small, acknowledged thing. And then she reached for her glass and said something light, and the conversation moved elsewhere. Kezia did not react. She stored it and kept it. The Sunday she found the second phone, Brandon was supposedly at the gym. Kezia was at the kitchen table finishing a work report when she remembered she needed his insurance card for a form. She went to the bedroom, pulled his gym bag out of the closet, and unzipped the front pocket. The phone was there, beneath the card. Black. No case. Not locked. She sat down on the edge of the bed and read it for 45 minutes. She read with the focus of a woman who has been half expecting something and is now holding it in her hands and needs to understand its full dimensions before she decides what to do next. Yvette. Months of messages organized by date in her mind as she read them. Pet names that made something behind Kezia's sternum go hard and tight. Hotel names she recognized from that part of the city. Places she had driven past. Places she had looked at the fronts of and thought nothing. Plans built around the evenings when Brandon had told her he was working late. Evenings she had spent alone in this house, cooking for one person or eating at the kitchen table with her laptop open. 3 months ago, Yvette had asked in a message when things at home were going to change. Brandon had told her to be patient. He was handling it. Everything would shift after Jordan graduated. After Jordan's graduation, he wrote, "Everything changes. I'm done pretending." Kezia read that line twice. She set the phone down on the comforter. She picked it back up. She read it a third time. Then she found the thread with Denise. It was all there, systematic and damning. Denise had known for more than a year. She had not simply known, she had participated. There was a Friday evening 6 months ago when Kezia, unable to reach Brandon and becoming anxious, had called his sister. Denise had answered on the second ring, calm and easy, and told her she had just spoken to Brandon herself, that he was fine. He was helping a friend move some furniture. His phone was probably buried in a pocket. Brandon's next message to Denise in the thread was 2 words. "Thank you." Denise's reply was a laughing emoji. There was more. A birthday dinner Denise had described to Kezia as women only, that Denise, in her message thread with Brandon, mentioned as the first time she had met Yvette in person. She told Brandon that Yvette was nicer than expected. Brandon had replied that he was glad they were getting along. Kezia's sister-in-law, a woman she had known for 23 years, a woman whose children she had sat with when Denise was in the hospital, a woman who had hugged her at their mother-in-law's kitchen table 3 weeks ago and said she was so proud of her. Kezia set both phones down. She sat in the quiet of the bedroom for a long time. The house settled around her with its ordinary sounds, the refrigerator running in the kitchen, a car passing on the street outside, a bird somewhere near the back window going through its few notes repeatedly. She breathed slowly. She was not crying. She was calculating. She had spent 23 years understanding the structure of this marriage from the inside. She knew every load-bearing wall. She knew what could be removed and what, if pulled, would bring everything down. She had not survived 2 decades of building something without knowing how building works. She put the second phone back in the gym bag exactly as she had found it. Same position, same angle, the insurance card laid on top. She zipped the pocket. She returned the bag to the closet at the precise angle it had been sitting before she moved it. Then she went to the kitchen, took out the leather journal, and opened it to the next blank page. She wrote for an hour. She reconstructed the message threads from memory, exactly as she had read them, with timestamps where she could recall them and approximate dates where she could not. She wrote the Denise thread in its entirety. When she finished, she closed the journal and stood it on the shelf between her mother's 2 books. Then she put dinner on the stove. Brandon came home at 6:30, said the gym was good, and sat at the table while she set out the food. He talked about a problem at a job site. Kezia listened and asked one question and nodded at the correct moments, and nothing in her face told him anything was different. When he went to bed, she stayed at the kitchen table with the lights low, drinking water and thinking quietly in the dark. She had one question inside her now, sitting cold and patient, waiting. After Jordan's graduation, everything changes. I'm done pretending. What exactly was he planning? And how far had he gotten in arranging it? She was going to have to move before he did. She called Patricia Wells the following Wednesday morning from her university office. Door closed, voice measured. Patricia was the kind of attorney who asked deceptively simple questions that had already done the work of 5 other questions before you finished answering them. Kezia laid out what she knew and what she could document. Patricia said she would need time and care. Kezia said she had both. Patricia asked her to organize everything into a written timeline. Kezia spent the next 3 weeks doing exactly that. The journal expanded with precision. Dates of receipts she had photographed when Brandon left his wallet on the dresser while showering, the specific Thursday of the restaurant receipt, the contents of the message threads reconstructed word by word. She added context notes beside each entry. What Brandon had told her on the corresponding date, who else had been present, what other information had been available to her at the time. When she sent the document to Patricia, it was 17 pages and organized by chronological date. She changed nothing in her daily behavior. She cooked the same meals. She attended church on Sunday. She sat beside Brandon at Jordan's end-of-year event at the University Recreation Center and clapped when their son's name was called. She answered Denise's casual phone calls in the same voice she had always used, warm and familiar, and listened to Denise ask about Jordan's graduation plans and whether Kezia had found a good dress and whether the whole family was coming. Kezia answered each question and said she was looking forward to seeing everyone there. She confirmed her speaking slot with Beverly, the event coordinator, who sent a detailed production schedule and confirmed the keynote position. Beverly asked if Kezia needed anything arranged at the podium. A glass of water, Kezia said, and a small shelf or ledge for a personal item. Beverly noted it without asking what the item was. She had lunch with Dr. Phyllis Okafor at the faculty club on a Tuesday. Phyllis, who had known Kezia for 11 years and had the particular understanding of a mentor who has watched someone become fully themselves over time, listened to everything across the white tablecloth without interrupting. When Kezia finished, Phyllis was quiet for a long time. Then she said that she would be there, front row, left side, where she could see everything. Kezia nodded. They talked about other things for the rest of lunch, and neither of them mentioned any of it again. She called Renata and Simone, women she had been close to since graduate school, and told them to be at Jordan's graduation, that she needed them there, that it mattered. She did not explain further. Both women said they would come. She trusted them enough not to need to explain, and they trusted her enough not to need to ask. Patricia confirmed that the divorce papers would be filed on the morning of the graduation. By the time Kezia walked into that auditorium, everything would already be in motion. The only thing that remained was the speech itself. She wrote it across 3 evenings in her office, starting over twice before she found the right shape for it. The final version was not a speech about what had been done to her. It was a speech about the kind of quiet strength that the world misreads as weakness. She pulled her mother's words from the journal and placed them at the center of it. Words she had read many times, but never spoken aloud in a room full of people. She practiced it, standing alone beside her desk at 9 in the evening, and when she reached the middle section, she had to stop and stand still for a moment until the feeling in her chest subsided enough to continue. Brandon, during all of this, grew more careless in the specific way that men grow careless when they believe they are already beyond consequence. He stopped turning his phone face down. He mentioned Yvette's name twice in conversation, once as a colleague, once as a friend of a friend. Each mentioned a small test, a toe dipped in, watching Kezia's face for any disturbance. Kezia gave him a surface as still as standing water both times. He saw nothing because she showed him nothing. She carried the leather journal in her bag everywhere she went. It did not leave her side. On the morning of the graduation, the city was clear and warm in the way late spring sometimes manages, the kind of light that makes everything it touches look considered. Kezia was dressed and ready before 9. She wore a deep burgundy dress and the pearl earrings her mother had left her. She stood at the mirror for a moment, not with anxiety or hesitation, but checking something else entirely, making sure the woman looking back at her was ready. She was. Brandon came downstairs while she was finishing her coffee at the kitchen window. He looked her over once, a brief appraisal that registered her appearance without commenting on it, and said they should leave in 20 minutes. She finished her coffee and rinsed the cup and picked up her bag. The lobby was filling by the time they arrived. University staff moved through with clipboards and headsets. Families gathered in clusters near the entrance, the atmosphere thick with collective anticipation. Beverly spotted Kezia from across the lobby and made her way through the crowd with her clipboard against her chest and a wireless microphone pack in her other hand. She handed Kezia the mic with quiet efficiency, confirmed the running order in a few quick words, and squeezed her arm and said she was going to be wonderful. Then she moved away to the next item on her list. Brandon was 6 feet away when it happened. He saw Beverly. He saw the microphone being clipped and confirmed. Something crossed his face, a flicker of recalculation, a rapid internal rearranging, before he smoothed it back to nothing. He recovered in under 2 seconds. Kezia had been watching him from the edge of her vision and counted every one of those seconds. She turned to greet 2 colleagues from academic affairs who had appeared at her side, and she laughed at something one of them said, and she looked easy and settled and completely at home in the lobby of this university that had been her professional world for more than 2 decades. Brandon came to her side and placed his hand on her back, the gesture of a husband, performed for whoever was watching, and murmured that they should find their seats. She let him lead her. She had already collected everything she needed from this lobby. Yvette was already inside. She had come through a different entrance and settled into the reserved front section with the older version of the graduation program, the one printed before the final keynote confirmation. Kezia's name did not appear in the version Yvette was holding. Denise was 2 seats down from where Yvette sat, already in conversation with the woman beside her, comfortable and unaware. Brandon settled in next to Yvette with the ease of a man who had already decided this was his reality now. The three of them in the front row, the husband, the woman he had chosen over his wife, and the sister who had covered for him, sat together in the good seats while Kezia made her way to the back. She sat. She opened her program. She found her name. She clicked her pen. She set the leather journal on her knee and watched the auditorium fill around her. A faculty member from the arts department turned from 3 rows ahead and caught her eye and gave her one slow nod, the kind of nod that means, I know, and I see you, and I'm here. Kezia nodded back. The lights adjusted. The ceremony was beginning. The university president spoke first, a carefully constructed 10 minutes about futures and responsibility and the particular privilege and weight of a degree from this institution. Then department heads, then class representatives, 2 students speaking on behalf of their graduating peers. The room was warm and full and paying the kind of attention that family celebrations draw. Not the rapt attention of something unexpected, but the contented attention of people watching something proceed exactly as it is supposed to. Then the dean of the College of Academic Affairs stepped to the podium. He said it was his particular honor to introduce the ceremony's featured keynote speaker. He spoke about her career with the specificity of someone who had read the document carefully and understood what he was describing. 22 years at Morrison, her work in academic equity policy, her research publications, her appointment to the President's Advisory Council, her current role as Assistant Dean of Academic Affairs. He said her name with the weight it deserved, Kezia Lawson Carter. The faculty section rose first, black gowns and colored hoods moving upward as one. Staff followed, then families, then students. The applause building as the room stood row by row until the entire auditorium was on its feet. The sound was real. The kind of sound a room makes when it is recognizing something genuine rather than simply being polite. Kezia stood up from the back row. She walked down the outside aisle toward the stage with the leather journal held in both hands in front of her, its worn cover catching the auditorium light. She did not look at the front row. She did not look for Brandon or Yvette or Denise. She kept her eyes on the podium at the center of the stage, moving toward it with the steady pace of someone who has known exactly where she was going for a long time. She walked past the row where Yvette was sitting. In the front section, Brandon's face had gone completely still. Not the stillness of anger or embarrassment. The deeper stillness, the stillness of a man whose understanding of the situation has just shifted entirely, and who has not yet caught up to what expression belongs on his face now. Yvette turned to look at him. He did not look back at her. He was watching the stage. Yvette dropped her eyes to the program in her hand, then raised them again to the woman walking toward the podium, and her jaw tightened in a way that was almost invisible. Almost. Denise's hand fell to her lap with the program still in it, the pages creasing. Jordan, from the graduating class section in the center of the floor, turned and found his mother walking toward the stage, and his face went through several things rapidly before settling into something open and stunned and very young. Kezia stepped up to the stage and crossed to the podium. She placed the leather journal on the small shelf Beverly had arranged exactly as requested. She adjusted the microphone. Then she looked out at the auditorium. 200 people, the faculty in their gowns, the families with their phones and their pride. Her son sitting in the middle of his graduating class with his cap slightly crooked and his eyes bright. And somewhere in the front row, a man she had been married to for 23 years, sitting still for the first time all day. She found his face for 1 second, just one. Then she looked at the graduating students and began speaking. "I want to talk to you today about silence," she said. "Not the silence of defeat. Not the silence of someone who has given up or been broken. I want to talk about the other kind, the silence of a woman who has decided to wait because she knows that what she is building cannot be rushed." The room settled into itself the way rooms settle when something real enters them. People lowered their phones. Parents stopped nudging each other. There is a kind of strength that the world misreads as weakness because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't explain itself to the room. It looks like patience. It looks like stillness. From the outside, to anyone watching without understanding, it looks like a woman who isn't reacting. She paused and let the pause do its work. But on the inside, she is working. A sound moved through the audience. Quiet, affirmative, the sound of recognition. Yes. I have spent the last 2 years doing work that no one witnessed, documenting, preparing, getting everything into order, carefully, the way women learn to do things when they understand that the room is not yet ready to watch them do it openly. I did that work in silence, in private, without an audience. And I want every single one of you sitting in these seats today to understand something. The work you do in quiet, the work no one sees, the work you do in the early morning or the late night when everyone who is supposed to be supporting you has gone to sleep, that work is the most real work you will ever do. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. In the front row, Yvette was no longer looking at the stage with any comfort. She was reading something in Kezia's posture, in the particular composure of this woman who had sat in the back row of this same auditorium an hour ago and had not flinched and had not cried and had not looked at the front section once. Yvette was beginning to understand the shape of what she was sitting inside. Brandon had not moved. His hands were clasped in his lap with a stillness that looked like control, but was its opposite. Kezia opened the leather journal on the podium shelf. She turned to the marked page, the slip of folded paper she had placed there weeks ago when she was rehearsing alone in her office. She did not look down at it immediately. She held it open and looked at the audience. "My mother gave me this journal," she said. "She used it herself, long before she gave it to me. She said that the truth deserves a witness, even when no one else is willing to stand up and be one. She kept records. She wrote things down. She told me, 'You write it down so that you never have to ask yourself later whether it really happened.' It happened. You were there. The record will speak for itself." She looked down at the journal. She wrote this. Her voice was even. A woman who knows her own worth does not rush to prove it. She simply lives inside it and waits for the room to catch up. She let that sit. 200 people, and not one of them filled the silence. Even the children in the audience were still. "Some of you will walk out of here today into a life that someone else has already decided to end," Kezia said. She held the pause longer this time, long enough that the room began to lean into it. "Do not be afraid of that ending. I wasn't." The silence that followed was absolute, total, the kind of silence that is not empty, but full of understanding, of recognition, of the particular collective breath a room holds when it realizes it is witnessing something real. In the front row, Brandon's clasped hands did not move. Beside him, Yvette's chin had dropped slightly, tilted toward her lap, as if the weight of what she was understanding had become physical. Denise held the creased program in both hands and looked at it instead of the stage. Jordan had tears running down his face. He was not trying to stop them. He was looking at his mother on that stage and understanding everything he had not known how to see before. The mornings, she moved quietly around the house. The evenings, she stayed up late at the kitchen table. The way she had sat in the back row today and not looked once toward the front section. He was understanding it all in one moment, the way revelation sometimes works, not gradually, but all at once, like a light coming on in a dark room. Kezia continued. She spoke to the graduates about the systems they would encounter that were designed to route them toward the back rows of their own lives. Not always loudly, not always obviously, but consistently, persistently, in the accumulated small moments of being underestimated and overlooked and undervalued by people who should have known better. She spoke about dignity, not the kind that needs witnesses, not the kind that performs itself for others, but the deep internal kind that a person carries alone and does not require anyone's acknowledgement to remain real. She told them that silence, deployed correctly, was not surrender. It was strategy. She told them that the most powerful thing they would ever do might look, from the outside, like nothing at all. When she was finished, she closed the journal with both hands. She stood at the podium for a moment without speaking. Then she looked out at the room one final time. She did not look at Brandon. The room came to its feet again, and this time the standing was immediate. No row-by-row hesitation, just the whole auditorium rising at once. The applause had emotion in it, the warm, complicated kind that is not just appreciation but recognition. The feeling of having seen something true. Somewhere in the third row, a woman was wiping her eyes. Phyllis Okafor, in the front left section, had both hands pressed together over her heart. Jordan was standing in the middle of his graduating class with tears still on his face and his hands together over his head. And the woman seated beside him was clapping without knowing why she had started crying. Except that the room was crying, and something in the room was worth it. Brandon did not stand. He sat in the front row of his son's graduation ceremony while the room stood around him, his hands still clasped in his lap, the face of a man whose plan has just been absorbed and redirected and returned to him in a shape he does not recognize. Yvette rose slowly after a moment. The way you rise when you need to look like you are part of something you have just realized you are not part of. Denise stood with her arms crossed over her chest, her program destroyed in her hands. Kezia stepped back from the podium, picked up the leather journal, and walked off the stage. He found her in the lobby after the ceremony, while families were still streaming out, and Jordan was somewhere inside being photographed with his classmates. Brandon came through the side door and stopped in front of her. He was controlled. Whatever he was feeling was being compressed behind the particular expression of a man who is aware of his audience and managing his visibility carefully. "You humiliated me," he said, low voice, tight jaw. Kezia looked at him with clear eyes and steady breath and the same calm she had carried into this building 3 hours ago from the back row and from the stage. "I gave a speech, Brandon," she said. "That's all I did." She picked up her bag and walked to where Renata and Simone were waiting near the entrance. Phyllis was beside them, her gown still on, standing with the solid certainty of a woman who has known exactly how this day would go. She put both arms around Kezia when she reached her and held her without saying anything. Kezia stood inside that for a moment. Then she straightened, and her friends closed around her and moved with her toward the exit. Jordan found her 10 minutes later in the bright afternoon outside. He held on for a long time. When he stepped back, his eyes were still red, and he was looking at her face the way someone looks at a person they are seeing fully for the first time. He tried to find words. She put her hand on his cheek and shook her head. He understood. He nodded. Brandon's car was gone from the parking structure by the time Kezia left the building. Patricia Wells had filed the divorce papers at 8:47 that morning. A courier arrived at the house that evening at 6. Kezia was not there. She was at dinner with her 3 women at the restaurant she had been meaning to try for 2 years, and the food was every bit as good as she had imagined it would be. And they stayed at the table for 3 hours and talked about everything and nothing and laughed more than she had laughed in months. In the weeks that followed, the structure Brandon had built around his other life began dismantling itself without Kezia having to approach it. Yvette withdrew within days. She had watched a woman walk from the last row of a 200-seat auditorium to its stage, hold the entire room in perfect silence, and receive a standing ovation, while the man Yvette had been waiting for sat in the front row and did not stand up. Yvette understood the arithmetic of what she had gotten herself into. Brandon's calls went unanswered by the 3rd week. The professional erosion was quieter but thorough. Several contractors and clients who had given Brandon referrals over the years had been in that auditorium, or knew people who had. Nothing was said directly. Nothing needed to be. The story moved the way those stories move. Not like fire, but like water, finding the low places. Denise called once and left a voicemail that spent more time explaining than apologizing. The way apologies do when the person making them is still more concerned with being understood than with having caused harm. Kezia sat in her car in a parking lot and listened to the whole message without moving. She sat with it for a moment after it ended, not because she was deciding whether to forgive, but because she was making sure she felt what she actually felt, and not what she thought she should feel. Then she texted back 3 hours later. One line. "I hope you were worth it" to him. She did not answer Denise's next call. She did not answer the one after that. Brandon tried twice in those first weeks. Both times, Kezia let the phone ring and felt no particular thing about it. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a quiet absence where something she had been carrying for a very long time had used to sit. His 3rd attempt came through Patricia's office. Patricia replied on her behalf. 6 months later, Kezia's kitchen table looked out through a different window at a different street. The new apartment was smaller than the house, but lighter, more morning sun, a porch off the living room where she had placed a chair and a small table, just the right size for a cup of coffee, and nothing else. She had arranged it simply. She had not tried to fill it. It was a Saturday morning. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee cooling beside her, the leather journal open in her hands. She was not writing in it. She was reading back through it, turning the pages carefully, the way you handle something that has done its work and can rest now. The dates, the times, the careful, factual record of what had happened, written in her own hand, witnessed by no one but herself and the woman who had taught her to keep records in the first place. She turned to the marked page in the middle and read her mother's words one more time. A woman who knows her own worth does not rush to prove it. She simply lives inside it and waits for the room to catch up. She held that for a long time, long enough to feel the full weight of it and also the full truth of it. And then she closed the journal. She got up and walked to the shelf between her mother's 2 books. She stood the journal there in the space she had cleared for it. She stepped back and looked at it The way you look at something that has completed the task it was made to do. Then she moved to the window and stood in the morning light with the rest of her coffee. Jordan called while she was standing there. He was 3 weeks into his first job, calling from his lunch break, wanting to know if she was free for dinner next week. She said yes. He said he had been thinking about her speech. She asked what he had been thinking. He said he was just proud of her. She told him she had been proud of him first. He laughed, his real laugh, the one that had been his since he was small, and they talked for 10 minutes. After she hung up, she stood at the window and finished her coffee and let the morning move around her at whatever speed it chose. She was not rushing anywhere. There was nowhere she needed to be that she was not already. Some women spend years being made to feel like they belong in the back row. But dignity does not need a front seat. It just needs time and patience and one moment in front of everybody to speak. If Kezia's story moved you, if you know someone who has ever been pushed to the back of a room they helped build, share this story with them and stay with us. Because there are more women like Kezia, and every one of them deserves to be heard.